To anybody who says they don't want to see a Beth Smith episode, all I have to say is, I found a possum! Yeah, we actually have a Beth Smith episode finally. And it's basically the main plot. I mean, yes, we kind of went over Beth Smith's childhood in Fruppyland, especially her messed up mentality and the fact that basically he trapped her best friend Tommy in Fruppyland. The episode starts off with the Cheers theme song. Granted, I like hearing it when I'm going to a bar. Of course, here it's just the two Beths reuniting just so they can have wine together. And of course, the family is heading off to an amusement park in space. I mean, yeah, we kind of went over this before. In this case, it's just an Earth-themed theme park presented by some guy who's never been there and is really basing his theme park experience off the works of Michael Crichton. The only parts about the Earth subplot, apparently at one time it was really bad, and apparently the creator, who happens to be Danny DeVito, Alien, apparently wanted to hurt all the guests. And finally figured out the only way really to bring guests in to hurt them is you have to build a legitimate theme park, which he did, which ironically has a gap. A store that I'm pretty sure not a lot of people have been to since, Amazon exists. Of course, this is also where the part of the promo where we have the bobblehead. The reality is the bobbleheads came from the fact of the mascots who were genetically engineered by the Danny DeVito alien and apparently were eventually chipped so that they would eventually start attacking all the guests, like in Jurassic Park or Westworld. Also, it is interesting, Morty finally hooking up with someone, an alien, and it gets really interesting when they finally find a closet and start making out. Of course, it gets very disturbing when you find out that the voice of Webby is telling Morty to be racist. I guess she probably should have went to Snake Planet. Now it's time to get to the main event, the Beth plot. As you know, Space Beth is having wine with Earth Beth, and they simply start talking about their problems, like their abandonment issues with their version of Rick, and then it's kind of dismissing it like, hey, father problems, where? And then decide, hey, I got a great idea. They decide to go back to age 10. And of course, leads me up to my favorite part. Earth Beth gets de-aged. Space Beth goes out looking for her, only for Earth Beth to say, I found a possum covered in blood. At this point, I was laughing and knew this episode was going to be excellent. I loved how younger Beth is being presented here as a complete and absolute sociopath. Just how messed up she really is. Makes me really wonder, was this the reason why Rick Prime or her Rick decided to take off? Their next big idea is why not have both of them de-age? I also love the fact that their next idea is, let's harass Gene. Go into Gene's house just simply to try stabbing him in the legs. Funny part is, I just love how Gene is just so okay with everything. He immediately sees these two little girls in his bedroom and is like, oh, you must be Rick Sanchez's daughters, de-aged. It's just like, almost like he's expecting this somehow. And of course, the two Beths decide to go into the walls and stab and hurt him. Perhaps kill him. And eventually set the house on fire. And have poor Gene try to reach his phone, which is now underneath the stove that's on fire itself. Reaches in and his hand is basically burnt to a crisp. With him saying, all my life choices led to this. Unfortunately, our two Beths just couldn't get along. It's like some German grocer. Two brothers who can get along. The two Beths immediately go to war. My favorite part about it is that one has a screwdriver and the other goes Rorschach using a lighter and aerosol can. Apparently, C-137 Rick gets tired of Earthworld and leaves to attend to Gene. It is interesting that Danny DeVito alien gets eaten by Danny DeVito mascot. C-137 returns to Earth. He immediately pays the fire department to look the other way, repairs the outside of Gene's house, and repairs his arm, so Gene is not turning to the dark side. Immediately, Rick gets fed up with Beth, simply decides to ground her, putting her in a timeout container unit. Although I do like the fact that the two Beths apologize to each other, cooperate, and then decide to turn on poor Rick, putting him in an aging tube and turning him up to 360 years old and start kicking him. I have to say this, I really think the writers are going through a lot of parent issues this year. I mean, last week we had to deal with Rick's own parenting problem, the fact he always felt he didn't get enough love from his parents, and This week, we're dealing with Beth being abandoned by Rick. I really wonder if Beth is the reason why all the Ricks simply just abandoned their homes. It is funny. Rick apparently seems to be more human than robot, even though he's got a robot eye, simply saying that he's proud of her. Everybody has a good cry. Rick rebuilds the platform on the tree. And of course, the funniest part about it is the two Beths like, do 10-year-olds really want to stab everything? I have to say this though, the two Beths act how 10-year-olds would act, despite the sociopathic tendencies. If you eliminate that, at random just yelling and screaming for no apparent reason. In the after credit sequence, we find out that Gene eventually figures out that 911 generally doesn't have an answering machine. Yeah, this was a very good episode. A lot of funny moments, especially with the two Beths as kids. The Fountain of Youth trope is one of the tropes that, all intents and purposes, really do enjoy. It's one of those things that can go either way. But when writers actually explore it, they can have a lot of fun with it. Or in this case, we get to see Beth as a sociopathic 10-year-old. This episode was a blast. Had a load of fun watching it. I think this is probably the best episode of the season so far, even beating out the other Citadel episode. Anyway, I'm going to check out. All I have to say is happy 249th birthday, America. Bye!